Oh, shit!
We're all in it together, kid.
Unfortunately, this video comes with an audio warning. My guest was sitting by a smoke detector that has a low battery, so every couple of minutes or so, there's a high-pitched beeping sound that I'm sure will bother everyone who isn't deaf. If this ruins the listening experience for you, as I'm sure it will, I totally understand. But there's basically nothing I can do about it other than promise that it won't happen again. My guest will be back to continue this conversation, so if you want to skip this recording, you can do that because I will quickly summarize the key points made in this discussion at the start of our next discussion. For those who are willing to sit through the tormenting beeping sound, please enjoy the show. Hey, what's up, world? This is going to be my first video where I have a guest speaker come on, and fortunately, or at least coincidentally enough, we're going to be talking about cholesterol and the overall health perspective that's sold to us. Now, this is a coincidence because one of my first videos, which has been long deleted by now, was actually about Einstein's vegan diet and the importance of cholesterol. So I'm not going to be the expert in this video. In this video, the expert is actually going to be my new friend here named Johnny. So I'm going to let Johnny take it away. But right before Johnny takes it away, I am going to share my screen. And Johnny, it is your show. You can tell the audience what brought you to my show. You can tell them that I had said something that I shouldn't have said, I suppose, actually, after looking at all the research now. So I'll let you take it away. Go for it.
Yeah, so I reached out to you. I sent you an email because you made some comments, and it's stuff that you typically hear on a day-to-day basis about. I think it was a football player that had. You're assuming that he probably has high cholesterol from a bad diet, and assuming that if he had and he had reported heart issues, and it was probably because he had a bad diet from high cholesterol type thing. So I reached out to you because that's something that everyone typically hears all the time, especially from their doctors, that cholesterol, having high cholesterol is potentially a bad thing. It can lead to heart disease and this, that, and the other thing. At least that has been the common knowledge for being pushed by most major large medical industries for the past, I would say, since the 50s and 60s, and especially going forward there, which led to a whole slew of things, food-related dietary guideline changes, and the push for statin-based medications. So I reached out to you because there is, I just wanted to make you aware of an alternative to that narrative. And it's been a very long-running narrative that most people are very familiar with. So people have heard that, oh, eggs are high in cholesterol, and they are, and therefore they should avoid eating high cholesterol foods like egg or animal fats, saturated fat, etc.
Yeah. So this was in regards to a video. I believe it was like 2 or 3 videos ago, where yes, I was obviously talking about something else that could be causing heart-related issues. But
Yeah.
I was being very sarcastic, and I was like, oh, well, maybe he just had a high cholesterol diet. And actually, I believe I did say that in a sincere manner. I looked at the gentleman, that it was a football player, and he appeared to be a little overweight, and I was like, maybe he had too much cholesterol. And to get the ball rolling a little bit too, in this direction. So yeah, we are commonly told that cholesterol is linked to heart disease. And actually, I even took a couple of nutrition classes, and this is what I was even taught in these nutrition classes. So you had sent me over these articles. I'm gonna read from, actually I'm gonna read from this one because this one was pretty revealing, and it's from the American Journal of Medicine. It's titled "A Reappraisal of the Lipid Hypothesis." So let me just quickly read this. So clinical trial results, the randomized control trial, an RCT, is the gold standard for validating or rejecting a medical hypothesis. Initial proof of the lipid hypothesis came from some of the earliest RCTs of cholesterol reduction, such as the coronary primary prevention trial of cholesterol and the first statin trials. These studies right here give some names of the studies, and cholesterol and recurrent events, the CARE studies. So actually, I'll keep on reading this a little bit. More widespread studies over the next 20 years produced mixed results, however. Regrettably, some clinical trial trials prior to 2004 have been tainted by scandals that led to new clinical trial regulations intended to safeguard patients and lend credibility to subsequent trials. And of course, those trials also provided mixed results. Notably, only 2 of these 29 studies reported a mortality benefit, while nearly 2/3 reported no cardiovascular benefit at all. So I find this to be pretty interesting that these studies that much of this science was originally based off of were studies that were done by some of these statin drug companies. So there were actually studies that were done trying to show the medical benefits of statins and stuff. But then the studies that were done afterwards, the studies that came later on, they produced mixed results. So this shows that there might have been some sort of corruption or some sort of buffoonery going on with these early studies.
Yep, massaging the data.
Massaging the data. That's a very good way to put it.
Yeah, and a big takeaway is, as it says in that statement that you just read out, is that these RCTs, these randomized controlled trial studies, were funded by the drug companies that are making the drug that's going to produce the benefit of lowering cholesterol. So they're creating the scientific takeaway data, the knowledge-based data that we're going to make these recommendations. They're creating it so that they can then offer a drug that is the solution to this problem that their data is showing potentially exists. So they're funding their own proof of concept, kind of, which most people would take away as a conflict of interest.
Yeah, definitely a conflict of interest. And it's actually interesting because most of these studies, they have like conflict of interest things attached to them. Let me see. I believe the National Library of Medicine is pretty big on this, where towards the end of their summarizations, they normally have a little conflict of interest. Where here we go, conflict of interest here. Most studies will have this conflict of interest. This article that I'm looking at here, there was no declared conflict of interest. This is another study I'll be looking at in a moment, because you actually mentioned eggs. But I just want to quickly say that this, when you sent me these articles to look at, I immediately thought about some of this news that came out earlier, or actually in the mid to late part of last year, where scientists find no evidence that depression is caused by chemical imbalances or low serotonin levels. Now, this was kind of big news because there's a lot of people who use SSRIs, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And a lot of these studies that were trying to link depression with serotonin imbalance, if you look at the conflict of interest, these studies were also funded by these drug companies that were trying to get the American public or the FDA or the CDC to approve these serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So yeah, it's pretty interesting how that, how the science gets muddied with these conflict of interest and with this any sort of money interest. But I just want to, before we move on, because you have a lot of interesting things to say, I just want to quickly read the abstract for this other article titled Dietary Cholesterol and the Lack of Evidence in Cardiovascular Disease. So I'll try not to butcher this reading, but I'm only human, so I might butcher it a little bit. So abstract, cardiovascular disease, CVD, is the leading cause of death in the United States. For years, dietary cholesterol was implicated in increasing blood cholesterol levels, leading to the elevated risk of cardiovascular disease. To date, extensive research did not show evidence to support a role of dietary cholesterol in the development of cardiovascular disease. As a result, the 2015 to 2020 dietary guidelines for Americans removed the recommendation of restricting dietary cholesterol to 300 milligrams a day. This review summarizes the current literature regarding dietary cholesterol intake and CVD, or uh, cardiovascular disease. It is worth noting that most foods that are rich in cholesterol are also high in saturated fatty acids and thus may increase the risk of cardiovascular disease due to the saturated fatty acid content. The exceptions are eggs and shrimp, considering that eggs are affordable and nutrient dense food items containing high quality protein with minimal saturated fatty acids and are rich in several micronutrients, including vitamins and minerals. It's weird, micronutrients are vitamins and minerals, but whatever. It would be worthwhile to include eggs in moderation as a part of a healthy eating pattern. So it's interesting that now, I mean, I wasn't even aware of this dietary guideline change. I guess that's not newsworthy item to put on the front page. But yeah, so I mean, I found this to be pretty interesting, and actually it ties in to some of the other articles that you sent, because I believe one of the articles that you sent makes the claim that saturated fatty acids, which they're trying to make as if those are a bad thing in this article. The other article actually says something about saturated fatty acids having a link to lowering strokes. So I found that to be a little interesting, how even now when they're coming out and saying, oh, well, cholesterol isn't as bad as we were selling you guys it before, but now you have to worry about these saturated fatty acids.
Yeah, and it's not so much of they're raising awareness of saturated fatty acids now. It's still a carryover from what people thought was legitimate science back in the 60s and 70s. So we're talking 50 plus years, or right around 50 years of conditioning where saturated fat was bad for you and cholesterol is bad for you, etc. And it's just taking, so I believe a key takeaway is that with any lie, it takes the truth years, and in this case, multiple decades to course correct for the hypothetical lies that were passed from way back when. The lies come first, and then the truth kind of sorts it out eventually.
Yeah, the lie. I mean, I hate to take this Shrek reference to an onion, but yeah, the lie has many layers to it, like an onion. And I mean, once you cut away one layer of that lie with a truth, you then have to deal with other lies. And I believe when I was learning a little bit of nutrition, they said that saturated fatty acids raised your cholesterol level because it increased the amount of cholesterol your liver produces, because I believe our body produces quite a bit of cholesterol itself. And they were trying to sell us this idea that, oh, yeah, saturated fats cause your body to produce more cholesterol. And the professor at the time was trying to warn the class away from coconut oil. This is when coconut oil was kind of becoming popular, but coconut oil is very high in saturated fats. So my professor was like, I guess, maybe unintentionally so, but she was almost like trying to like demean coconut oil, and it's like, encouraging these other vegetable oils, which also have a bad rep.
Right, and vegetable oils, there's a big difference between coconut oil and most other vegetable oils in that they don't have as high of saturated fat versus what they would have is the monounsaturated or the polyunsaturated fats. And that's why there was a big push for, oh yeah, have olive oil and all these other ones, because they don't have that saturated fat element, or which led to like Crisco, what's I can't believe it's not butter, the fake butters, the margarines, there we go, the margarines and all these other alternative fats, because it wasn't made from traditionally animal fat, and therefore was made from plant fat, which is not saturated fat. It's the poly and the mono unsaturated fats. And they were pushing those as being the healthy alternative. And that is also just a big misnomer. But to kind of tackle a little bit on the saturated fat raising your cholesterol levels, there is sort of like yeses and nos to that aspect. Like your professor and people that understand, raising your cholesterol through eating of saturated fat, that's fine. That is by fine, I mean it is correct that it happens, right? It is a natural mechanism that happens in the body. However, the thing that people come away with is the whole notion that, oh, but we don't want to do that because cholesterol is bad for you. And that's the part where you're coupling real science with misnomers and sort of a falsified bias. So to put into perspective, the human body produces, this is a very rough estimate, 20 times more cholesterol than what you could ever possibly eat on a day-to-day basis. So the question would be, well, if cholesterol was ever so bad for us, why would our liver produce such crazy amounts of cholesterol, far greater than what we could ever hope to ingest dietarily? Well, then maybe it's not that cholesterol is bad to begin with. Maybe that's, that would be my natural conclusion, would be to assume that. Another major takeaway is, okay, what about the fluid surrounding your brain and your brain itself? What's that? Well, that's a whole lot of cholesterol. Your brain is in a cholesterol soup, so to speak.
I hate to cut you off. You're spot on there. Actually, I know a gentleman who was prescribed like these statins for controlling his cholesterol, and it gave him all sorts of neurological problems. He was having memory problems, and he was having other problems with his thinking faculties. And that's because, yeah, your brain is actually mostly cholesterol. And just a little quick information for everyone, cholesterol is actually probably one of the most used substances in our body. Here's a little Google thing that just gives a small little glimpse of that of what cholesterol is used for. So, it's used for making cell membranes. It's used for making many hormones. It's used in your production of vitamin D when you're out in the sunlight. And it's used, I know it's used for a number of things in our body, and that's why it's actually produced in such high amounts by our liver. And I just want to quickly say, this is actually the point that I had made about Einstein's vegan diet. I have quotes here from Einstein. Just one second. I believe it's here. So a lot of people, I think they're aware that Einstein died from a abdominal aortic aneurysm, meaning one of his main arteries just erupted. There's an artery in your aortic, which is like kind of by your heart, and his artery just exploded on him, and he died from internal bleeding. Now, when I had did a video about Einstein, I had looked at one of his quotes, because some people were saying, oh no, he had eaten meat and stuff. But there's a quote that came later on in his life. Where is it? Here we go. This is a quote near the latter part of his life. He said that, "So I am living without fats, without meat, without fish, but am feeling quite well this way. It always seems to me that man was not born to be a carnivore." So not only did Einstein remove the cholesterol sources that come from meat and animal products, but then he also removed as many fats as he could, meaning he probably also had very little saturated fats to get his liver to produce cholesterol. So I'm sure that Einstein's death is actually linked to him having very low cholesterol levels, and those very low cholesterol levels basically ended up weakening the lining of his arteries and ended up screwing up his cell membranes. And I believe, at least this is my theory, that he died because of this extreme vegan diet that he was participating in.
Yep, but that was a little too far in the past to ever know for certain. But gee whiz, it would it would open a few eyes if that were to be proven to be the case.
Yeah, yeah. Of course there's no way that I can prove this. I was just looking at things that Einstein had said and things that I knew about cholesterol. I mean, I could be completely wrong there, but yeah, that's a little digression. I apologize. I'll let you take it away.
Well, I never realized that Einstein was vegan slash vegetarian. So you shared some knowledge just now that I was oblivious to, and yeah, I mean it goes to show and lead to things where just from that quote alone, you could at the very least assume that Einstein is meat adverse and fat adverse, and you couple that with, oh, he did die of heart issues. So at the very least, this whole notion of being plant-based is good for your heart. You can kind of see that there are clearly some holes in that sort of common knowledge set.
Yeah, it would be interesting to do a study particularly on like vegans. I mean, I know there's some vegetarians who still who still drink milk and still have other cholesterol sources. So it'd be interesting to do a study on vegans in particular and heart diseases amongst vegans, or even
Oh, that does
aneurysm.
yeah, that does exist. There
Oh,
are.
okay. Okay, there is a
Yep.
study on particularly
Oh yeah.
vegans. Okay, yeah, because I know that I know of a lady, she's like she was a neighbor of my aunt's, and she had like a vegetarian diet and she had a baby, and I believe like either it was during childbirth or right after childbirth, she actually died of an aneurysm in the brain. And to me, I saw this like, okay, well, you're trying to develop a whole nother body inside of your body. That's going to take quite a bit of cholesterol, creating all these new cell membranes. So if she's not intaking enough cholesterol, it's going to be taking it from her own cell membranes in her own body, and it left her depleted and in a fragile state without her realizing it, and basically opening her up to basically getting an aneurysm. So I don't know. I'm not very well versed on this. So I
All
mean,
right.
clearly you've come across studies about vegans. So I'll let you inform us.
Yeah, well, it took me a long time because I don't have a nutritional background. That's not part of my formal education. But there, I did have health issues way back when, and that led me down the road of doing multiple years of very extensive research into trying to figure out how to resolve my own health issues, and just going down a whole lot of uh, alternative explanations, a whole lot of just going through studies in and of themselves, following up on doctor seminars. I'm talking like just seminars and conventions of just doctors talking about boring doctor stuff. And I found stuff like that fascinating, and it led me down to sort of discovering and learning about all of this stuff. And when I say multiple years, I really do mean it. It's a minimum of 3 years straight. It kind of spending the equivalent of getting a science degree in this type of stuff. The amount of information I was pulling together. But to slightly backtrack, I just want to kind of cover one last thing because it seems like there might be like people have questions, and there is one outstanding elephant in the room in that people are wondering, well, why is cholesterol bad for you? And we have to acknowledge that what was the cause of it? The cause of this whole cholesterol scare was that the cardiovascular disease and heart attacks were on the rise, and it got very popular when I think it was, I can't remember which president it was. It might have been Roosevelt or Hoover or one of them. Some president had a heart attack, and that caused sort of like a national scare about, oh, what's a heart attack? Because it did not happen, not even close to the proximity or to the rate that it's happening nowadays. And that led down to funding of research to figure out what's the root cause of heart attacks. And through autopsies, people open up the arteries of all these heart attack patients, and what they would see is they would see in their heart and around their arteries, they would see a lining of cholesterol. But it wasn't just cholesterol. Right. So what they noticed is that these blockages that were being created are in fact cholesterol, but it's cholesterol and other stuff. And that's And the reason why that's there is the interesting part. Now, so they perform these autopsies and they discover, oh, there's cholesterol in the arteries, it's clogging it up, and that's preventing blood from properly circulating. Therefore, that's the smoking gun right there. That's what they assumed at the very least. So they had a hypothesis, and then they went to go and try to test it out and convert it into a proven theory, which never happened. But that has been the narrative for, as I said, 50 plus years. So what is this substance that's in the arteries? It is cholesterol. It's also calcium and other things. So think of it like, and there is an explanation for this. This is a natural mechanism of the human body and just, well, animal bodies in general, is that when there is damage, think of it like
or inflammation. Actually, I believe
yes.
I hate to cut you off, but yeah, from my understanding, it's that our body uses cholesterol to combat inflammation to a certain degree, and this is why people who smoke cigarettes have increased heart disease, and it's because the chemicals in the cigarettes cause inflammation in the arteries because those chemicals get into our blood, our heart is pumping that blood at high rates, and then our body tries to use the cholesterol to patch up this inflammation and to patch up any potential damage to the lining of our blood vessels and such. And in doing so, that's what causes it to stick to the walls and to build up. But I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah. So it's exactly that. So think of it like plaster that you put up on the walls, or the mortar that you use in order to make a brick building.
It's our body's concrete.
It's our body's concrete. So it's cholesterol and calcium and other components, but cholesterol and calcium. So it's creating this sort of concrete of sorts and plastering over the lining of the arteries in order to repair the damage that's being done via inflammation. And damage, it gets done and through other potential means. So we're kind of blaming, or putting a lot of blame in, sort of saying, hey, there's cholesterol there and it causes blockage, and that's where that's the problem right there. But what we should have done is take the extra mile and determine, why did the body have to plaster all this cholesterol along the lining, along the heart, in order, what was causing the body to respond in that way? And that's the fault that we did way back when, and we're still living with the consequences of that fault, of not identifying the root cause. If you eliminate the root cause of why the body needs to plaster the lining of the walls with cholesterol and calcium and other stuff, with this concrete, because it's trying to repair damage. If we just prevent the damage from being done to begin with, we'll never have to worry about having heart disease, or that form of, or collection of heart disease causing possibilities. So
yeah, I just want to. I hate to cut you off again. I'm sorry. I had left because I had to get my computer charger. You weren't boring me. I swear it was good stuff. I just wanted to say one more thing. Not only does our body use cholesterol to fight inflammation, it also uses calcium to fight inflammation. So it's interesting that it's a mix of calcium and cholesterol, and of course other things. I'm sorry. So go ahead.
Yeah, and there is a scan. Preventative measures, or ways of being diagnosed with potential heart disease and stuff like that. Doctors typically look at your cholesterol levels, but those are not very good predictive indicators. And in fact, the best form that I'm aware of a predictive indicator of whether or not you could develop heart disease is a particular machine scanner called the CAC scan. It stands for coronary artery calcification. So that's what the CAC is. And
it checks how like pliable your arteries are, right? Like how rigid
how calcified.
They might. Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It checks how calcified they are by seeing how rigid they are, or how.
Yep. And your score should be 0. And if it's 0, then you don't have to worry about heart disease. Typically, you don't have to worry about heart disease. And if it's above that, then and the further higher your score, the more at risk you are of developing some sort of artery health CVD issue. So
Mine's is at 100.
yours is at 100.
No, I'm just joking. I don't know what mine's is. I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it's not very low.
Well, it depends. I mean, typically when we are all nice and young, we have the benefit of youth to prevent or we're starting. So when from the womb, we're starting off with hopefully the best of healthful state. But as we sort of continue onwards through life, there are factors, external environmental factors, as well as internal factors that are going to deplete and waste away our life. And the general goal for most living organisms is to, prolong their life and to sort of stay alive as long as possible and as a high quality of life as possible, or at least that's how I would envision it. And when we're doing things that we are unaware of that are shortening our potential life that we have allotted to us, and we're unaware of it, I would love to be made aware of those types of factors so that I can eliminate them, so that I can further improve my current quality of life, as well as extend the amount of years I have left to live.
Yeah, totally agree. But they don't want people living long, because then the longer you live, the more you figure out that they're lying to you. They're like, oh, wait a second, this person's been alive long enough to know that we've told them this lie before. They got to keep our life nice and short, and if not our life physically, then at least they have to rot our brains out, right?
Yeah, and some people might be asking the question, well, why would they lie to us? Well, the answer is very simple. It's money. So there is no money to be made when people are healthy, right? So commerce in general is driven by demand, and demand typically comes from problems, right? If someone has a problem, like they have a bunch of canned food, right, but no can opener, that's a problem. And they're going to spend lots of money to solve that problem so that they can finally open up all of their canned food. It's the same thing. So where there is no problem, i.e., when there are healthy people, there's no money to be made. But when people are unhealthy, you better believe they'll spend every ounce or every amount of money that they have available to them to correct their health. Otherwise, they die. So that, from my perspective, that is the number one commodity of sorts, selling health, because to me, that is the most high priority, value-oriented substance that any individual would want to have or to ensure. There's like the basic pyramid of I think it's like 3 different tiers or 4 different tiers. It might be 7 or something like that. Of like desires.
Maslow's pyramid of needs, his hierarchy of
Yeah,
needs.
yeah.
Or okay.
Exactly. Yep. That one. And health and shelter and food. And health kind of falls in line with shelter. It's like a combination of food and shelter and stuff like that. But it's in line with that lowest base foundational tier. And anything that's in that foundational tier, it's gold right there. There's always, for example, food. Like there's always going to be a need for restaurants and people to eat, and farms and people to buy and sell and trade food. That's always going to be there for all of humanity. So it's not going away.
Unless if they didn't tear nature down around us, if they didn't go and massacre as many animals as they could in the 19th century, and then bulldoze like as many vegetable and fruit-bearing trees and plants, then there might be a little bit less of a need for restaurants and supermarkets and such. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, to me, health is a big commodity, because it's death is the greatest fear, and of course death is the greatest fear because it's the greatest unknown. Nobody's been able to come back and tell us, hey, don't worry, when you die, you don't really die, you just move on to another plane of existence. Definitely, but yeah, I agree with you. Health is huge commodity, definitely a big money maker, but it's also something that the government can use to push policies that might violate our rights. You know, it's something that they definitely use to push new legislation. You know, I believe the preamble of the Constitution, they've actually I'll leave the Constitution out of this, but yeah, you're spot on when it comes to it being a big money making operation.
Yeah, and in that preamble, the very first word that comes up, I think I know the phrase you're talking about. It's the first word is life, right? Life, liberty. So life first, and then freedom, and then after that, pursuit of happiness. So yeah, so if
Yeah,
people are wondering, like,
I believe that excerpt is from the Declaration of Independence, not the
oh, there we go.
Constitution.
All right,
Yeah,
yeah, sorry.
but yeah, they've managed to do like some weird mental gymnastics where like they've tied keeping us alive to securing our rights also. Like, you know, I believe they like this is what they do, I believe, when it comes to like such draconian measures as any sort of health legislation, anything that's like let's just say school vaccines, you know, the vaccines for school. They're like, oh no, well, you have to get these vaccines for school because if you don't, then you're putting other people you're putting their life at risk, and by putting their life at risk, you're actually putting their rights at risk because everyone has a right to life. Or, you know, they have some weird mental gymnastics. But yeah, I mean, health legislation is definitely the number one seller.
Yeah, so it's the number one seller because there's big money to be made, and that's why these lies are propagated. It's the sale that you see on TV all the time is living a luxurious lifestyle of kings, and kings and queens, and they did not live, with health in mind, right? They're feasting every day, drinking wine and whatever else, and having a very fun time at the expense, eventually, of their health. And that's what I'm talking, hundreds of years ago. And now that's sort of everyone in society is living in that way, where they're consuming alcohol every day. They're consuming desserts and fruits every day. When you think about it, you go back thousands, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of years ago. What were humans eating? Well, it's everyone kind of, or at least most people understand that, there are a few big giant species that went extinct because humans hunted them out, like woolly mammoths and large types of animals of that sort. And we spent multiple generations of humans in that sort of way. And it wasn't until 10,000, 20,000, give or take, maybe even up to 50,000 years ago, where we started to settle down into a more agricultural-based society. So this whole notion of farming and consuming plants on mass scale is relatively new if you're following under the science of evolution and that aspect of things. So there's a lot of what people need to, if they reflect on that, for people who sort of follow that side of it, then they should kind of wonder, like, oh, if it's only if that period of humanity only represents 1% of the existence of humanity time-wise, well, then clearly, if they're following the evolutionary perspective, then clearly humans didn't evolve with that way of eating. We evolved with the former, which is hunting large ruminant and large fauna type animals like woolly mammoths and stuff like that, and pretty much surviving almost entirely off of things like that, very large, very fatty animals.
Yeah, just one moment, Johnny. This thing is gonna time out on me. It wants me to upgrade so I can get more recording time. So I think I'm gonna have to stop this recording and then begin a new recording. Okay, so just hold your thought. I'm gonna hold it with you. Just one moment.
Yep.
Johnny, you were just making up the point about the fact that as the animal that we are, as the human animal that we are, we spent most of our time on this planet, at least from what we know about history, what archaeologists tell us about history, we spent most of our history eating primarily animal meat, and this is why these large animals like woolly mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, and such were made extinct because we basically ate them all. Now, I just want to cut in before we move on. I just want to say I push back on this. I mean, I agree that we appear to have spent most of our time eating large animals. The only thing that makes me push back on this is that, my father, he grew up in Puerto Rico, and I'm sure that, like, the Earth wasn't a tropical paradise for most of history, but there are a lot of wild fruits in existence that people, I'm sure, ate prior to 5,000 or so years ago, prior to these large agrarian societies like ancient Egypt and such. But I'm definitely in agreement that eating refined grains and stuff is something that's relatively new to us as a species, at least from what we know from history, unless we were civilized much longer before, or if you're one of these Bible believers who think that the Earth is brand new, basically. But yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you on there. So I'm gonna
Oh,
go
yep.
share the screen real quick. Let me just change this. And then go ahead and say where you, or pick up where you were just last at.
Well, to follow up on your comment, I'm totally with you that if fruit was available, we would definitely eat fruit. And in fact, fruit in most places around the world is a seasonal thing. So even if fruit was readily available, we wouldn't be able to eat it. And there might be some fruits and fruit trees in some regions of the world that are available all year round. But that's the rarity and not the typical case. But we would absolutely try to find and eat these fruits, and a lot of them come into season in the fall-ish, right? Just in preparation for winter. And I know that if you're along the equator, there isn't much in the way of seasonal changes, but there was a benefit to eating fruits. So I'm not saying it was exclusively meats. What I was getting at was it was mostly meats.
Oh,
Very,
totally agree with you
yeah.
there. I mean, yeah, fruit trees do require like a X amount of sunlight per day to even produce the fruit. So yeah, I mean, in the northern and southern hemispheres, definitely a seasonal thing. So yeah, you're spot on. I mean, it's not like we were just using preservatives a whole bunch back then. But anyway, yeah, I'm sorry, go for it.
Yeah, and in the case of fruits and honeys and things of that nature, and if you just sort of mentally observe what a typical animal in the wild would do, like a bear, and this obviously applies to humans that weren't sort of readily performing agricultural practices. They would find these sources of high carbohydrate esque foods like fruits, and they're very delicious, and they would consume them, fatten up in preparation for what would be a long fasted ish winter, where they would be able to fatten themselves up like bears. They go into hibernation of sorts in the wintertime, and what they would consume before leading up to that point is things that would fatten themselves up so that when they are hibernating and in this fasted state, they wouldn't have the need to eat because their body is surviving off of their energy reserves that they have stored up. And that practice applies to a lot of animals all over the world, humans included, very much so.
Yeah,
And fasting,
that's why in like the fall, I mean, usually like around October-ish, almost every October, I get like this insatiable hunger where it's like my body's just telling me like eat, eat, eat. I'll have more pumpkin pie, and it's almost like that's still sort of. It seems to still seem part of it. It still seems to be still a part of our biology. Like it still seems like it's encoded in our DNA to say, hey, you know what? Around this time of the year, eat up because there's going to be a winter coming where you're not going to be able to eat as much.
Right, yeah, and that's the case. But if people ever were to, whether it be in various religious texts, almost all of them talk about fasting in one form or another as being not only therapeutic, but also it's just another tool. Just like how eating a fruit to fatten yourself up can be a very useful tool, especially if you're living in an environment, in sort of prehistoric type of environmental settings where shelter or the readily available availability or high availability of foods won't be there because everything's covered in ice and snow.
Yeah, agreed. So I'm curious, I'm sure that our audience wants to know too. What do you believe is causing this inflammation? What do you think is causing our body to use cholesterol or to misuse cholesterol in this manner where it puts it on our artery walls?
Well, it's not a misuse of cholesterol. It is a very legitimate and appropriate use of cholesterol. Otherwise, the human body just wouldn't do it if it wasn't appropriate. Now,
Yeah,
there are
yeah, no,
some
I know. I
rare,
mean,
yeah,
like, what do you think? What do you think is triggering it to create this heart disease? It appears to be something that I don't know the historical how long heart disease has been plaguing humanity, but it seems to be something that's been a real problem. I mean, according to this abstract that I'm looking at here, over the past 10 years, cholesterol levels have been falling, while the number of Americans dying of heart disease has been steadily climbing. So,
yeah.
so what is causing our body to block up our arteries with this cholesterol?
Yeah, so you said it essentially at the very start of this conversation. It's inflammation, and there is I don't know if it's a quote or the title of a book, or the title of a book might be slightly different, but it's something along the lines of the root cause of all disease is inflammation. It's something to that extent. I forgot the author, the doctor such and such, but essentially it is inflammation. So you have to look at things that would induce inflammation, and it can be external environmental things can absolutely create inflammation. If you cut yourself, guess what? Your wound is going to be inflamed. Uh, and also, more importantly, what you consume and eat is going to cause some degree of inflammation, no matter whatever it is that you're going to consume. If you are consuming something, however perfect it may or may not be, it will induce just a little bit of inflammation. And for some foods, it will cause a lot of inflammation. And when you are chronically inflaming yourself with or causing inflammation, chronic inflammation, if you will, through the eating of some of these dietary foods, well, that's going to lead to long-term health issues because you are living a life of chronic inflammation. Now, concrete things and some of the more obvious ones, there's you can kind of think of it like a priority queue of what's the highest priority thing to sort of remove that would cause inflammation. Well, that's pretty simple, and I think most people will agree it's going to be sugar and alcohol, right?
Yeah, of course.
And any form of sugar, and leave it to the FDA and to big corporate food industries to figure out the tens, if not hundreds of different ways of relabeling sugar. I mean, you have sucralose, sugar, fructose. I mean, they all are, and with fructose in particular, yes, it's sugar, but it does get processed differently in the human body than regular sugar. And sugar is a combination of glucose and sucrose. So those two kind of get handled essentially the same regarding human metabolism. And more or less, sugar in general, whatever it may be, fructose, sucrose, glucose, however, if you look at the processing, the metabolic processing that the human body goes through, it is very near identical to that of alcohol. So if you think that sugar is less harmful than alcohol, think again, it is just as harmful as alcohol.
Yeah,
So
I remember reading an article recently, and it made the claim that like just like one alcoholic beverage can damage your DNA. And now this was funny to me because when I was taking these nutrition classes during my associate's degree, uh, all of my nutrition professors, I had like three or four different actually I had three, but I had four classes, and one class I had like the same nutrition professor as a previous class. But in all of those classes and in a health class, they were telling us, oh yeah, two alcoholic drinks a day is fine. And they were like, it's good for your, I believe they were trying to say that like it's a good exercise for your kidney or your liver. I forgot what it was. And I'm just like, no, it's not a good. No, it's not. This is terrible advice. And
yeah,
I mean, I know a ton of people who would drink every day, like every day. I mean, even as in their late teens, like 19, even earlier. I know some people who were drinking like pretty heavily at like 17. And I was never much of a drinker. Maybe it's because I don't have a drinker's stomach, but it always made me pretty violently ill. I wasn't a fan of it, and a lot of those friends of mine, they clearly have aged exponentially faster than I have. I was born in '89, so this year I turned 34, and I still get carded. Like if I shave and I go to buy a lottery ticket, I get carded, and they're like, "Oh, you look so young." I'm like, "No, this is how old a 30-something-year-old is supposed to look."
yeah.
It's like I just haven't drinking myself to death. And I drink a lot of water too.
Yep, yep. It is that,
And,
and
and
I mean,
raw garlic works wonders. I used to eat like a clove of raw garlic every morning. I'm gonna get back into that. But yeah, that also works wonders. There was a girl in another one of my friends' classes, and she was much older than everyone. I believe at the time she was like 36 or 37, and she looked as old as these kids who were just starting college, and they were all amazed. And she was like, "Well, yeah, I have raw garlic." So raw garlic is a great anti-inflammatory. So it's a great way to combat that chronic inflammation. But yeah, I'm sorry. I'll let you.
right, yeah,
Yes, sugar causes inflammation. Alcohol causes inflammation.
yeah.
What were you saying that I kind of missed what you said about the sugar composition and the alcohol composition being similar or something like that?
Oh, yeah. The way the body processes it metabolically. It's a chart I looked at long ago, so I won't be able to sort of recite it by heart or anything like that. But the metabolic functions that sort of trigger one another and the way it gets metabolized is essentially the same. So how your body, more or less, there is some slight differences on how your body has to deal with alcohol, but more or less that mechanism is near identical. Now, with on this little hypothetical totem pole of things, priority things to remove from the diet, the very next step isn't that far of a step. It's pretty much all starchy grains. Any type of starch or grain or high carbohydrate, low fibrous food, those are going to be the very next ones because it only takes the body roughly 15 minutes to convert those starches and those carbohydrates into glucose. And glucose is going to get processed the same way as if you drink a cup of sugar. It's just going to take 15 minutes more, roughly speaking, in order to trigger that sort of metabolic path. So to think that, oh, if I'm eating whole grain made, bread that's made with whole wheats and things like that, and that's going to be less harmful than having a sweet donut or some sort or a muffin. You should think twice about that because it doesn't take very long for it to turn into the same bad type of metabolic induction happening. Now, the reason why that's bad is there's a multitude of factors. Think of it like if you think about terms of fuel for the human body to sort of utilize and to sort of to utilize for energy, there's essentially two main sources of fuel. There is the one that everyone understands and is aware of, which is glucose, and the other one that most people don't really aren't aware of is a fuel source called ketone bodies. And the way you can kind of think of these two fuel sources as glucose being kind of like diesel fuel, and ketone bodies being kind of like hydroelectric power, where it's super efficient and has less of exhaust fumes being created. So there's less oxidative stress that's happening when your body is primarily working off of ketone bodies versus a much higher amount of oxidative stress that comes from excess glucose. Now, the body has a way of dealing with excess glucose, a very natural way of dealing with it. And if it didn't deal with it, then you die. It is a problem if there is higher and higher elevations of sugar glucose levels in your blood. That's what leads to diabetics going into a diabetic coma and potentially dying, going blind, etc. It's called glucose toxicity. So if you ask any doctor, they're very much aware that crazy high amounts of glucose in the human body is bad for you, and that's going to lead to potential going into a coma or dying or other issues. So the body has a mechanism of dealing with that, and that's the secretion of insulin. So the
That's
insulin
the job
hormone.
I think that's the pancreas's job, right?
Yes, the pancreas. So the pancreas is going to secrete insulin, which is a hormone, a very natural, regular hormone for the human body. It secretes it. It essentially instructs your body to take all this excess energy, these excess sugar levels. It can't remain in the bloodstream because that's causing tons and tons of oxidative stress. It's causing tons of damage. And that kind of leans back into, where is this damage coming from? Well, excess sugar in the bloodstream will definitely damage your arteries and cause your body to have to deal with that later on via plastering with cholesterol and whatnot. And it tells all that, it tells all that sugar to store it away because it doesn't want to drop all that energy. That energy can be used. So what does the body do? It takes that energy via the signaling from insulin and says, oh, all right, let's store this away in our fat tissue so that we can have a reserve for later on in case we need it. And that's why we get fat from eating high sugary foods that are high on, there's a chart called the glycemic index. So it kind of rates foods based on how high it's going to spike your blood sugar levels. So you can imagine like sugar in and of itself is going to spike it real high. Fruits, breads, potatoes, all of those starchy, rich bananas, etc., are going to spike your blood sugar. But for a normal person or a very young person that isn't diabetic, it'll spike their blood sugar, and an hour, 2 hours later, that'll slowly come down as the body is doing its job by storing it away as fat. Or if the person is very much an athlete and they are actively training and doing intensive exercise, well, then they can kind of utilize that energy that's circulating and burn it off while they're, and by burning it off, I use that term very loosely, and utilize that energy as they're doing whatever type of physical labor intensive tasks that they're currently doing. So that is a way to lower it, but it's not a great way. And don't think that you can kind of chow down on a box of donuts and then exercise it off, because a box of donuts will add far more calories than you could ever hope to exercise off.
No, and it's going to create more oxidative stress. What I find interesting is that when I was doing a little bit of research before this video, I was looking at lipoproteins, which is like cholesterol, your LDL and your HDL. And I found this, lipoproteins carry cholesterol and triglycerides to cells in the body. Now, triglycerides is basically that stored fat. That's what your body turns the excess energy, your excess glucose. It ties it up with some fat. It ties it up with 3-glycerin. So I found it interesting that, okay, well, is it possible that this excess glucose is really what's making this cholesterol into bad cholesterol? When the lipoprotein, when it has excess triglycerides in it? Is that what's turning or softening it up, or is that also possibly what's causing it to carry something that's going to trigger inflammation? If you have this lipoprotein with its normal cholesterol, does the triglycerides that it's attached to or that attach to it, does this maybe play a role in inflammation? It's just a rhetorical question. It's just something that my mind was just piecing together right now while you were talking. But
Sure. Yeah, sure. And there are people that I follow, people that are doing, gathering, performing research, gathering information, and sort of cross-referencing and having essentially chats, one-on-one chats, and sort of peer chat with other professionals within the field of cholesterol research. And it's still very much under discussion as to whether or not cholesterol is just overall total cholesterol is a useful measure of health, and or rather cholesterol in general should be used, or the more specific thing, which ties into triglycerides, which is what some people are saying is, oh, you can pretty much ignore LDL cholesterol, and what's more important, and total cholesterol for that matter, and what's more important is the ratio of your triglycerides to HDL. Now, one thing, thankfully, most places that I have found collectively agree on is that HDL cholesterol is fine and safe and is the good cholesterol. So what some people have pointed to is saying, okay, if your HDL is high but your triglycerides are low, then that's a sign of good health. And I haven't found anything that is contrary to that. So if anyone wanted to sort of still utilize their cholesterol numbers and try to discern how they're doing health-wise, they could. What I would recommend is to focus more on their HDL and triglyceride ratio and making sure that their HDL is high while their triglyceride is low. That would be more useful than just overall LDL. That's, once again, that's my sort of personal take on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like sugars and these breads and these starchy foods, they're gonna shoot up your triglyceride levels because they're gonna be pumping this energy into your body at a faster rate, and then that's gonna cause your body to tell itself, okay, well, take this excess energy, take this excess glucose and stuff, and convert it to triglycerides, and that'll yeah, I can definitely see that leading to inflammation. Something else I was thinking about, I'm not sure if you're
before you get into it, I just want to tap onto the fact that when it's converting it, keep in mind this is going to be stored away as adipose tissue. So this is going to be stored away as body fat. And once it's in that form, it's not circulating around your bloodstream. It's not causing any issues. So, I just want to add that in there, that yes, it's bad that, sugar is being converted into fat and all that stuff, but the body does very smartly store it away for later use and get it out of the circulatory system and get it out of places where it shouldn't be.
Okay, yeah, I see that. Now, something else, I'm not sure if you're going to be heading in this direction. I mean, something that I thought about while thinking about this inflammation and the increase in inflammation, I was wondering, does the pesticides that we're using also have some link to this increase in inflammation? Is it eating bread in general, or like I'm curious if like maybe organic bread will have less of this will cause less inflammation than unorganic bread that has more pesticides in it. Because I mean, I'm just thinking in like the timeline wise, I mean, people have been eating bread for centuries, and was it simply the increase in bread intake, or was it maybe something added to this bread that and these sugars that now is causing more inflammation that maybe than otherwise was being caused?
Oh yeah. There's I have at least three answers, or three types of answers for that can of worms right there. The first is that it's irrefutable you can absolutely survive off of bread and other types of foods. That is what makes humans, the dominant species on this planet. So that much is certain. But
we're the most adaptable, yeah.
right, but is it optimal? So that's what I'm sort of giving as a takeaway, is that is bread in and of itself, yes, we can survive off of it, but is it optimal for health? And my takeaway on that is absolutely not. It's the food that was fed to slaves way back when you go back to like ancient Egyptian time and all that. Like,
yeah,
it's a slave
Egypt,
food.
Rome,
Yes.
ancient Greece. Yeah, there was it was primarily something that was needed to feed the masses, especially when you had like large groups of people that were dependent, like a slave class.
Exactly. So when people are thinking about these types of things, just think, what is your goal? Is your goal to survive, or is your goal to thrive and be the most optimal healthy form that you can be? And if it's the latter, then you definitely want to throw away those types of things. Now, alongside with bread, you're talking about essentially the herbicide, pesticide, and then organic. And there's still two more answers to that, and that is, so there is, when you bring up the herbicides and pesticides, absolutely, that is very damaging and very toxic to our body and to any bodies, right? Those things that get sprayed onto crops in general, it's not just in grains, it's in corn, it's in soy, it's in lettuce, it's in pretty much any plant-based agricultural food item. Those elements are going to be sprayed to a large degree. Now, even if you go organic, that's not to say that you're going to go away scot-free, and that's going to be the other answer. But before I transition onto that one, one of the key things that gets sprayed is called glyphosate, or you might pronounce it as glyphosate.
Yeah, it's a glyphosate, also known as Roundup, and that's like been proven to cause cancer.
It is very terrible. There is a doctor, I think his name is Dr. Zachary Cole, who showed some very interesting information where when you look at the charting of data based on health, the increase in overall health issues, and the usage of glyphosate in our agricultural system, because it is relatively new. We started to increase our use of glyphosate in, I believe it might have been as early as the 70s, but certainly in the 80s, and it really ramped up in the 90s to a crazy high amount, and continued, and probably even higher into the 2000s and beyond of that chemical. And alongside that, you see a massive ramp up, and the nature of the curve of adverse health issues that are happening throughout the U.S. Population, and the usage of that, the curves align very, very closely. They kind of follow each other in the same sort of big ramp up curve that they do. So it is a very revealing set of information just from that alone. So there's that. Now, to say that you're going organic, and keep in mind that ancient breads, ancient grains are genetically different from the ones that we have now come to consume. Even if it is organic, these strains of grains that we're eating nowadays, they are genetically GMO'd differently. So it's almost going to be impossible to get something that was more in line with what was being consumed thousands of years ago.
Yeah, that's a great point. And even if you're organic, I believe the USDA allows for like something like 5%. Like, even if it's labeled organic, it could still have like up to 5% of pesticides. But I think it's a much better point that you make about these grains being different than the grains that existed, 500, 1,000, 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. Now, even if you are going with organic, and you can find it's hard, but you can find these types of grains that are kind of ancient sort of genetic strains of these grains and stuff like that. Sure, you can find these things, but even when you do that, you have to then go down the path of learning about anti-nutrients that are in plants. And anti-nutrients is like this big broad umbrella of chemicals that are going to purposefully inhibit a creature's uptake of nutrients, certain types of nutrients. And there's different, it's like a collection of different families of chemicals. So there's, and some of these people are familiar with, so like phytates is an anti-nutrient, lectins is an anti-nutrient, and one of my personal favorites that is very, very bad for you is called oxalates, that's the end form is called oxalates, and it's kind of like a general, the chemical form is called oxalic acid. Now, a lot of people would be familiar with oxalates if I say calcium oxalates. Most people know that if they are suffering from kidney stones, because that's what kidney stones are made from. And kidney stones are made because, well, if you are consuming food that is high in oxalic acid, well, then your body, it is a toxin. It's an anti-nutrient that is going to, what oxalic acid does is it binds to minerals, and some of the minerals that it loves the most is calcium, and it will bind to them, and it'll even bind to them, it aggressively searches for it. So when you consume it, it will leach it off of your bones, for example. It will leach that calcium, that much needed calcium, and it will bind to it and prevent your body from ever absorbing it. And that forms an oxalate crystal, and that oxalate is toxic to your body. If you consume too much oxalic acid and are forming too much oxalates within a short window of time, you can kill yourself. It depends on the nature of the person, and your dosage makes the poison kind of thing. So if you're doing something like a spinach smoothie, for example, you are playing Russian roulette with how confident you are on processing that type of toxin, because spinach is one of the highest oxalic acid foods out there.
Interesting. So, I mean, I got the food pyramid up here. So pretty much the food pyramid, they just turned it upside down on us. You know, I mean, they got the bread. They're like, yeah, you need 6 to 11 servings of bread, and this is per day. And like,
Yep.
make sure you get your fruits with all of the oxalates in there, and your vegetables with some more anti-nutrients mixed in there. But you know, things that are really nutrient dense, like your meats, avoid those. Only have 2 to 3 servings of those per day. So yeah, that's and of course they got their fats, oils, and sweets at the top.
Well, the sweets is correct, but
yeah, of
the
course,
fats
the
and
sweet,
oils,
yeah. But
it's
that's incredible. I believe you were saying something about it was the Canadian food pyramid that they used to have liver on there, and then they got
their dietary recommendations.
yeah
Yeah, they used to recommend liver, and then it was, I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago or something like that, they removed liver, which is one of the most nutrient dense foods that a human could consume in the entire world. That and fish eggs. Those are two extremely nutrient dense. Pretty much any meat in general is going to have every single vitamin and mineral, every single amino acid, protein that you require, as well as every single fat that you require. So
yeah, and if you have like some of the bone marrow, and I believe that there's some fish bones that you can cook correctly, you can get your calcium from them as well, right? Because I don't think meat itself is rich in calcium, right? You have to actually have the
it'll
bone
have
marrow.
calcium. It will have calcium too. So you do not need to go beyond just eating. Pick your choice of meat, whether it be beef, pork, fish, whatever it is. You can pretty much survive entirely off of that. You could survive entirely off of egg. You could survive, and when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. You can survive entirely off of raw milk, because what does a baby survive off of entirely for the first year, 2 years, 3 years, etc. of their life? It's going to be milk, right?
Yeah,
Breast milk.
yeah, it is milk, but I believe that don't people get lactose intolerant when they drink too much milk, because the lactic acid breaks down. Like I remember learning that like milk is digested differently. Like it passes through like a certain membrane, and I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe I was taught that people who become lactose intolerant, what happens is that the lactic acid wears down at that on that digestive membrane, and when you lose that digestive membrane, it then makes you lactose intolerant, but it's making you lactose intolerant because basically your body is no longer really digesting the milk. It's in the manner it's supposed to.
Lactic acid is not exclusive to milk. Lactic acid you can get in whole slew of fermented foods. I mean, fermented vegetables will have lactic acid. Yogurt has lactic acid, as it should. So I wouldn't say it's lactic acid associated. It could be the lactose, the sugar content that's in the milk itself.
Okay.
But for certain, surviving entirely off of milk, I wouldn't recommend it. It's certainly doable, and obviously it is doable as a baby. But yeah, we're adults. We're not babies anymore. And just like if you just look around at other animals, right? They're young, are once they grow up to a certain age, are no longer surviving off of milk. So you could naturally assume that it seems like at a certain key age we should kind of wean ourselves off of milk and eat something else. And that's what we do in general. So I'm not saying that milk in and of itself can be a singular food for optimal health, but when you're sort of looking at the nutritional profile of milk, and I'm not saying to remove milk entirely, I still consume raw. I make a yogurt called kefir or kefir. People pronounce it differently.
I buy that in the store because I'm in the city.
Raw milk. I buy raw milk from a farm and I ferment my own yogurt using kefir grains, and that's what I consume dairy-wise, as well as cheese. And cheese is fermented milk. And cheeses, once again, they might be a little low on a couple of vitamins, but and maybe some minerals, but they have the full spectrum of fats, the full spectrum of proteins in there, and you can survive off of that almost indefinitely, off of like things like cheese. So you're when it comes to like animal-based foods, you are getting the bang for your buck when it comes to all of the nutritional profile. And harkening back to liver and eggs, whether it be poultry eggs or fish eggs, those are superbly nutrient dense when it comes to sort of size versus density of those vitamins and minerals. I'm not saying to eat liver every day. Definitely, I mean, if you enjoy the taste of it, go for it. And you don't want to overdose on liver because it is that nutrient dense. When I say it's nutrient dense, it is crazy nutrient dense. So if people are okay with the flavor, I'm okay when I mix it in with regular ground beef. You can eat liver maybe like once or twice a month and get your vitamins and minerals there. If you feel like you're running short on something, and even then, it's not necessary to do something like that if your overall diet is nutrient dense, mostly animal based, and you're avoiding key vegetables and other plant substances that are high in anti-nutrients. And that's a big takeaway. It's more so avoiding the bad than it is consuming what could be good. I'm less concerned about what is okay to eat or what is good for you to eat because it's so nutrient dense and doesn't come with any problems. I'm less concerned about that. I'm more concerned about removing the bad stuff. That's more important.
Yeah, okay. I just want to quickly say our time is closing in. We're probably gonna have to do another session, but don't worry, I'll just send you a link like within 2 minutes. It takes time for it to download our recording, but yeah, we're already running out of that time. But that's fine. I'm gonna try to squeeze in some stuff. So one thing I wanted to say, I believe we do need some vitamin C, and I don't think I'm familiar with any meats or animal-based products that provide us with vitamin C. I think that vitamin C we can only really get from fruits and vegetables. Like broccoli gives a lot of vitamin C. But
yeah, that's another misnomer about vitamin C. The amount that
real quick. All right, because Zoom only allows us to record like 50 minutes at a time, we just have to stop the recording and start it back up. But okay, we're just talking about vitamin C. You were gonna say something about vitamin C because I was saying I believe we do need some vitamin C. Not sure if we can get it from meat. So go ahead.
Yep. With vitamin C, that's also sort of a misnomer. With that, I don't know. It could be manipulation of nutritional databases, but there is, or some other reason or rationale for why people believe that there isn't vitamin C in meat. There is actually vitamin C in meat. It's not as high as what you'd find in certain fruits and mostly vegetables that will have vitamin C, but there absolutely is vitamin C in meats. And in some databases that nutritional databases that are in different countries, they'll register some degree of vitamin C that is in meat. And vitamin C in general, it is something that can be depreciated as you heat up food. But once again, I wouldn't worry about vitamin C. It is, as you said, it is something that is very important for the human body. It helps synthesize proteins with collagen and create new protein from that. So it is an important vitamin, but it's not something that is exclusive to plants whatsoever. You will find your fill of vitamin C in any pick your choose of animal based food. It will be in there just as it will be in plants. Now, there is something that people are unaware of regarding vitamin C, in that vitamins, the human body, vitamin C, your body's intake of vitamin C is in conflict with carbohydrate intake. So if you are consuming high amount of carbohydrates, your body has to ignore, or it isn't able to readily absorb whatever vitamin C that comes with those carbohydrates. In addition to that, so that's its own statement there that people can sort of look into and sort of research on their own, in that carbohydrate intake will prohibit the body's utilization of and uptake of vitamin C. And combine that in addition with, if you are to look into just synthetic vitamin C, like citric acid, you'll also find that that form of vitamin C might not be ideal because it kind of and could potentially be toxic to the human body, given the synthetic nature of how it's actually manufactured and made. So those are things that are its own sort of big giant gaping void of research to sort of look into. So I just want to raise those things as things that people aren't aware of. Most importantly, that if you're increasing large amounts of carbohydrates along with, and those carbohydrates, you're expecting the vitamin C that comes along with it to be sufficient, well, you might need to think twice, because they are in conflict with one another. Not to say that your body won't be able to utilize that vitamin C, but the amount that you are utilizing is going to be lower if you're constantly ingesting carbohydrates throughout the day. So, and with that said, you can even look into certain historical, biographical books or autographical books. For example, there's one I remember very keenly, which is about, I think it's called Magellan, and it's about Magellan's voyage around the world. And Magellan, there was I guess someone keeping records. I forgot what they were, maybe an accountant or something like that, but they had I think it was a diary or some sort of notebooking, and they were recording that travel, that voyage, in their whatever diary book thing, on a day-to-day basis, and it was very well upkept. And from that, a whole bunch of information and learning came from just that voyage in and of itself. And Magellan, by the way, didn't make it through because he died in a war that he fought, I think somewhere in like the Philippines or something like that, one of the island nations at the time.
He died in like Southeast Asia somewhere.
Right. But Magellan, one of the things that didn't happen was Magellan did not develop anything close to scurvy, which is one of the things that can happen, and one of the best indicators of, hey, you're vitamin C deficient, is you get scurvy. So
Well, what's interesting is he probably didn't develop. I'm sure that he wasn't eating the same as like the deckhands and stuff. He was the captain, so I'm sure he was having probably less bread and probably more meat.
yes,
Going back to the idea that at that time most of the people who were well, that the diet for people who were in the lower classes was different than the diet for the people in the upper classes.
Yep. You're hitting the nail on the head. So in that those sort of historical documents, it was noted that Magellan he already did sailing. Here he got his in his younger years. Here he got his stripes, sailing around and fighting other various wars and stuff like that, and got familiar with life on a boat, extended periods of time on a boat, on a ship, traveling. So when he prepared for that journey,
I think you're supposed to drink a lot of seawater, right? Just joking. Sorry,
you're not too far off on that. Yeah. So he prepared barrels full of dried, cured, fermented meats. So that was of note. Now, what he consumed on a day-to-day basis, it wasn't recorded, but it did, at the very least, according to those documents, document that he did have fermented meats and cooked meats, sausages and stuff like that. Things that preserve
that's
very
pretty
well.
interesting, because I'm not sure if you can see the screen, but when I looked for meats that had that were high in vitamin C, it looks like the cured meats are the ones with the highest vitamin C. Specifically, they claim Spam has 12 milligrams of vitamin C per serving, which is about 16% of your daily value for women and 13% for men. So that's actually pretty interesting that he had cured meats, and you're linking that with his the reason why he wasn't getting scurvy.
Yeah, and it was also noted when he said that the crewmen that were getting scurvy, and those were very much recorded within those documents. It was also recorded in those documents that they were eating sawdust. So,
yeah, that sounds pretty healthy right there. Just your daily dose of sawdust that'll really settle things in the belly.
Yeah. So that's sort of a long kind of takeaway about vitamin C. The main thing is that yes, meat has vitamin C in it. It is not devoid of vitamin C. There is vitamin C in it. And I guess another side thing is that the dietary recommended guidelines of how much would be adequate, those numbers are, well, at the very least, there's inaccuracies in those numbers, and it's on a per vitamin or mineral basis. Your mileage will definitely vary. So what they report as being healthy ideal for vitamin C it definitely would fluctuate. I would say that perhaps those numbers are accurate if you are eating a high carbohydrate diet, because of that blockage that happens when you're consuming carbohydrates and your body's trying to get its vitamin C. So maybe you do need more vitamin C when you're eating lots of carbohydrates. And if you reduce your carbohydrate intake, then you could reduce your vitamin C intake and still be perfectly fine, right as rain.
Yeah, I mean, that's that. What I'm thinking about while we're having this discussion is that it seems like they have us on a diet. I mean, as you said from the beginning, it's all about money, and it seems like this high bread diet does require us to eat more. And not only does it require us to eat more, that means that more money for them. And, I mean, I've noticed this. I mean, and people can try these experiments themselves, maybe make some alterations to your diet and try to be mindful as to how hungry you feel. And like, I've noticed that, okay, in the morning, like this morning, my breakfast was a broccoli and an egg omelet with a little bit of cheese, and I didn't have a bagel with it or any other bread with it, and I'm not feeling hungry. I feel pretty well satiated. I feel good, but I know for a fact that if I had this egg and broccoli omelet on a bagel, I know for a fact right now I would be starving. I would be hungry. I would be experiencing a frustration that comes with like low blood sugar. Like how they have these Snicker commercials where like, oh, you're not yourself, eat a Snickers. This has to do with low blood sugar levels. And I've noticed myself that, hey, when I have bread, I start feeling hungrier faster. And it could be that the bread is doing something to the way that my body is absorbing the nutrients, where when I have the bread, it's telling my body, no, you got to eat more. I mean, maybe those nutrients are getting absorbed into the fiber of the bread, or whatever structure of the bread, and it's not getting into my system the way it's supposed to naturally. But I mean, I definitely see this as a big money making operation, as you said. I mean, I was inclined to say that, hey, look, we're eating more. The more we're eating, the more we're oxidizing, and then thus the more we're aging, and then the sooner we die. And of course, they probably want us to die earlier, because if we live longer, then that means that we can enjoy our retirement longer, and that means that, you know, the government has to send us a check longer, or however that works. So the longer we live, it also means less money for them. But I mean, I'm still also, of course, I'm a big time conspiracy theorist. Me, it's they want us out of the picture as soon as possible, so we can't pass on the knowledge to the next generation. You know, they want these generational gaps to exist. But I definitely see this as, you know, big money making operation.
Oh yeah, big time. And when it comes to money, people might wonder, like, okay, what's more profitable? Is it plant-based agricultural products, or is it animal-based? And the answer is very much plant. It's so much plant in that in how cheap it is to produce plants versus raising an animal that for a minimum of a year in order to get a return on investment on something like that. Yeah, the profit ratios heavily favor that of the grains, the easier to grow crops and foods, the monocropping and stuff like that. Just profit per insert your metric unit that you'd like to use. There is just way more profitability in those types of foods per pound or however you want to measure it, than there is in
I think they measure
meat.
them in tons, but
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, there's definitely I was watching it was like a cattle farming operation, and how they have to first they have to raise the cow up to a certain age, and then they have to move that cow to a farm that will fatten up the cow for like X amount of time. And then after they do that, they have to move it to somewhere else that I believe does the slaughtering of the cow. I don't know, but yeah, it's a way more expensive. It's a way more money consuming operation when you're dealing with livestock than
Yep.
of course than when you're dealing with plants.
Yep. So as a big business owner, and I want to increase my profits, perhaps switching or increasing demand for the more profitable products that I offer. Let's say I offer both meat and animal and plant-based products, but my plant product line has a much higher profit ratio or profit versus the animal one. So what would I want to push and advertise more? It's going to be the one that generates even more revenue for my company, whatever it may be. So it is as simple as that. Now, you mentioned something earlier about hunger and this association with hunger and eating grains and carbohydrate-esque foods, and you're absolutely correct. And that is it's a known solved science. There is a hormone in the human body that's responsible for controlling hunger, the sensation of hunger, and a separate hormone that's responsible for controlling the sensation of satiety, feeling full. And they are in obvious yin-yang flux with one another. And there is another hormone that I've already mentioned that actually prohibits and blocks your body from being able to get that sensation of feeling full and feeling satiated. One of those hormones is called ghrelin, and the other one, which I've already mentioned, is and there's a third one. I just forgot the name. Once you start researching ghrelin, you'll definitely find, or you should be able to find the other hormone. So the one that I did already mention is insulin. So when you are spiking your blood sugar, your body is naturally going to secrete that insulin. Insulin blocks your body's ability to feel satiated. So it does become this negative feedback loop where once you start consuming carbohydrates, your insulin starts getting elevated. Your insulin levels start to get elevated in order to deal with that excess blood sugar. Then that will block your body's natural ability to feel satiated because the hormone itself is being blocked from the other hormone, insulin. And that does create this feedback of once you start eating carbs, you want to eat more carbs. There's other factors that are in play. Those are more in the sort of the dopamine hits that you get, especially when you're consuming sugars and sweet foods, or that mixture, that super awesome mixture, that delicious mixture of sugar and fat combined together, where pretty much you get, that's like the entire category of desserts, where you have, donuts and ice cream and all that stuff.
Or even people's favorite breakfast meal, which is cereal. You got
Oh
you mix the high sugar carbs with the fatty milk, and you got the. I mean, I know that there's also something else to do with milk and calcium that also might inhibit our hormones. I know somebody who takes a some sort of a like hormone pill. They take some sort of medication because they have problems with their thyroid and their production of hormones. And this medication, it says that you're not supposed to have any calcium type foods with it for like an hour before it or something. And when you look into it, it's because it messes with the absorption of this I think it's the medication, or it messes with the absorption of hormones. I don't know, it messes with something, but I don't know. Yeah, I see cereal, like breakfast cereal, as one of the worst things that people can have.
Yeah, and I mean, I have a thyroid issue. That's actually what started my whole journey into looking into and resolving my health issues. So right now, I have to take a pill, a thyroid hormone replacement pill every day. Because my thyroid is shot. I have hypothyroidism. So my body doesn't produce, my thyroid doesn't produce enough of the hormone, and it's a very important hormone at that. It's one of the most important hormone producing glands in the human body, the most important being the pituitary. But yeah, so that kind of started that, dealing with that health issue 8-ish years ago, give or take, or 9 years ago, or almost 10 years now. That has kind of led me down this whole path of figuring out how to fix and better align my sort of health experience. And it didn't start off as hypothyroidism. It actually started off in the worst form, which is called hyperthyroidism. So I had hyperthyroidism. I swallowed just to sum it up real quick, I swallowed a radioactive pill. It was a radioactive iodine isotope that goes, the thyroid is what utilizes iodine, and it's irradiated, so that was fun. It came in a lead canister and everything. It was kind of cool. Cool enough to kill my thyroid, and now my thyroid doesn't work anymore.
Jesus. Yeah, I think that the iodine and the iodized salt is also irradiated. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, iodine likes radiation, but iodine is a very important nutrient, so I mean, we do need it. So yeah, there's that, but once you realize that you have to be on pills for the rest of your life, you kind of get kicked in the pants to figure out naturally, or at least to get a grasping of what caused it to begin with, and how to sort of fix and get your health in shape. Because for me, it was a choice of either that or death. So I'd rather just educate myself than die.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that that's exactly what it takes for most of us, is like, for us to get a kick in the ass and then be like, okay, wait a second, what caused this? Why did I get kicked in the ass? And what can I do naturally to remedy this kick in the ass. That doesn't require a lifetime of pills and medication and dependence on big pharma.
Yeah, and there's multiple members of my family that are also suffering from health issues. I have multiple alcoholics in my family, and just from seeing their life and their health go downhill, suffering from strokes and diabetes and other things of that nature. People very very close to me, and me knowing what I know now and sharing that information, trying to get them to course correct, and seeing very positive results. Both in myself, it wasn't just the thyroid issues that I was suffering from. I actually suffered from osteoporosis. So,
The holes in the bones.
right, lower density bones, and typically, well, what the common knowledge is, you do not recover from that. You just try to prevent further deterioration of your bone density, and you get prescribed pills that on paper, or by on paper I mean these pills will cheat the medical scanning machines to think that your bones are actually denser, but the density that it is building up within your bones is kind of like higher density but less
It's more brittle.
more brittle. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
I'm
exactly that.
curious. I'm curious. Did you narrow down any potential suspects that created these health ailments?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Were you
So,
were you eating like a high sugar diet when you were younger?
well, yeah. I mean, I was eating standard American diet for most of my life, especially into my 20s. But when I got into my later 20s, I switched to eating way less processed foods. I was following the dietary recommendations of things like eat low fat, eat whole food, cook your own food. I was always cooking my own food, eat low salt, stay away from cholesterol. I was following all of that stuff. I wasn't eating too much animal stuff, although I was still eating eggs and
So
meat and stuff like
yeah,
that.
so that probably is what screwed up your thyroid too. Lack of cholesterol for hormone production. I mean,
Potentially, yeah, potentially.
potentially. I think that's the issue with the person that I know who has hormone problems is that her diet is all kinds of jacked up, and of course, she eats sweets, she doesn't eat enough meat,
Yep.
and heavy reliance on just junk food and stuff. I got lucky when I was younger. My father took me. He thought I was flat-footed. He noticed something weird with my feet, and he's like, "I think that you might have flat feet." And I didn't have flat feet, but when I went to the guy to check on my feet, he was like, "You know what? Let me check your spine." And he was like, "Oh, look, you actually have a little scoliosis." And he was like, try working out your back more. And I was like, all right, that kind of got me into exercise. But what
Yep.
it really was is that one of the things that I drank the most was this iced tea that my mother would make when I was younger that was super high sugar. And, I would eat cereal in the morning for breakfast, and all that sugar was dehydrating the supports in my spine, and that sugar was just really jacking up my spine. So yeah, that's what got me on, like, being health conscious, or being, aware of what I was putting into my body, and things like that. And for bones, raw garlic is a great supplement. Don't overdo the raw garlic, because raw garlic is also an antibiotic, and if you have too much raw garlic, you can actually screw up the bacteria in
Yep.
your intestines, and you can kill yourself with it. But raw garlic is great for people who have bone problems. Um, it helps your body utilize that calcium better. It helps it really stick into your bones, the raw garlic. And of course, it reduces inflammation, which means that you're going to have less calcium and less cholesterol going to fighting inflammation, and you'll have more of that to go to hormone production and bone health.
Yep. And regarding bone health, so going back on my little story on that, is that I actually reversed osteoporosis, which does not happen. It doesn't happen to the point where my endocrinologist doesn't understand why my bones got at a minimum 30% stronger. And
how'd you do that? How'd you pull that one off?
yeah, and my doctor wanted to prescribe me bone strengthening pills and stuff. I did none of that, no pills whatsoever, and this was purely through dietary change. Right? And I spent time researching it, and there are 2 vitamins that are absolutely key on promoting good bone health and things of that nature. And this kind of combines into the first issue that I found was that there was elevated calcium circulating through my bloodstream. It was cancer level high, which is very problematic. You do not want high levels of calcium in your bloodstream when it shouldn't be there. That can lead to heart attacks, strokes, and all that sort of stuff. So that is a very big sign of something very wrong. So that was the first flag. And then I got a couple of bone density scans, which then verified I had osteoporosis. And what I looked into was, all right, how do I fix the calcium irregularity and how do I strengthen my bones? So for calcium irregularity, you want to make sure that you do not take, especially if you have weak bones, you do not supplement with calcium at all. You will get plenty of calcium in your diet. You do not have to go out of your way to consume extra calcium. And in fact, it will be dangerous if you consume extra high amounts calcium pills and stuff like that. Do not do that. All right, so that's the first bit. Vitamins that control calcium in your body is vitamin D3. Vitamin D3. It's got to be D3, not vitamin D2. Vitamin D3, which you'll get from sunlight, and vitamin K2. That is another very important one. Vitamin K2 you'll find in all animal fats. You'll also find it. So both of those are fat-soluble vitamins. All right. So you're going to get it. You'll find those vitamins in fat in various forms, usually animal forms. Well, always in animal forms, and some plant forms you'll find it, but it might be in a different format. For example, there's certain forms of vitamin K. For example, K1 is plant-based. You'll find that in kale, but the human body is going to do almost nothing with that vitamin K1. No matter how much you get, it won't be enough in kale, and you're also going to get a bunch of problems that come along with kale, which I'll talk about because it's related to this. So you want vitamin K2. K2 is best in fermented foods. So things like if you want it in plants, it would be like sauerkraut, kimchi, stuff like that. And any animal foods, especially if it's fermented animal fats, so cheeses, the best place to get vitamin K2 is going to be in liver, specifically poultry-based livers. So the liver of geese, ducks, chickens, etc., turkeys,
house
whatever.
Parrots.
Yeah, house parrots.
No, just joking. Don't eat your house parrot.
If they get too annoying and swear at you, you teach them a good lesson.
Yeah. I'm curious. Is that a parrot in your background that's making the squeak? There's like a squeaky sound every once in a while coming from your audio. It sounds like a parrot that I used to have.
Oh, no. It's there is a smoke alarm that needs a battery change. And right now I'm not in my house. I'm in some vacation house right now up in Maine.
Okay, so everything's low batteries. Everything's like not being kept up with. Yeah, no, I totally understand.
Exactly.
Yeah,
this is a weekend vacation.
So vitamin K2
and vitamin D3. So those
D3.
specifically. And with vitamin D3, that is super important for a multitude of reasons, like megaton of reasons, which does relate to COVID. And I could talk about that separately if you want to at a later time.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that. I know that it's the vitamin D is good for all kinds of colds and illnesses. I make sure that since I'm in the northern hemisphere over here in New York, I make sure that I go out in the summer. I mean, not the summer, in the winter, whenever there's like a sunny day, I'm like, all right, let me try to find a nice sunny spot and expose my body to some sunlight just for that vitamin D3.
Yeah. And the most important thing that I changed diet-wise is removing what I thought was healthy plants. And this all tied into like the research I was doing at the time to correct my elevated calcium and my to regrow what I thought might be possible was regrow my bones. I didn't realize I would correct it that much, but it was removing the anti-nutrients that I was consuming in my diet at the time. So a lot of at that time I was eating lots of salad, and it would be like spinach salad. I was making kale soup, Portuguese style kale soup, eating lots of dark leafy greens.
Were you having those like wheatgrass shots, or I forget what kind
No,
of grass
no,
they
no.
are. Okay, yeah, I see a bunch of health nuts do that. I'm like, that can't be super good for you.
Yeah, I wasn't a blender person. I didn't blend stuff. I just cooked naturally and consumed food in that way. And at that time, I was doing things. I already made a big correction in how I was eating. Where I was doing keto, but it was more plant-based keto than it was. I was still eating animal foods, but it was more plant-based keto than it was animal-based keto.
Okay,
so I
that
realized
screwed you over because you had all those anti-nutrients in that. Okay, yeah, I can see that.
But even before then, I was consuming salads and stuff like that for lunch and stuff like that. So it was just a long time running of those anti-nutrients, and specifically, I figured it out to be the oxalates, the oxalic acid. In those foods, I learned about which foods were super high in oxalic acid. There's actually databases online that was built up by a community of people that were suffering from chronic kidney stones, and they know exactly what it is. It comes from calcium oxalates. They built a database of, hey, avoid these foods that are high in oxalic acid because it will form kidney stones in your body if your body deals with oxalates in that form. Some people detox from oxalates in different methods. It can actually come out of your eyes in crystallized form. It comes out of your skin, and it just, your mileage may vary. Most people that suffer from arthritis or joint pains, which I was one of them as well. I didn't have arthritis, but I was getting joint pains, especially in my lower spine. That was where my body decided to store those oxalates. So once I cut that up, raised my vitamin D3 and my K2, and the way I did that was I switched to more animal-based foods. I eliminated the plants because that's where the oxalates was coming from. And I also, that's when I started taking as a supplement cod liver oil in order to correct that, because cod liver oil is super high in vitamin A, vitamin D3, and vitamin F. And if people don't know what vitamin F is because we've broken down vitamin F into a multitude of other vitamins called the omega fatty acids. So in this case, it would be omega-3s. Cod liver oil is super high in omega-3s, which everyone knows is awesome and great for your health. So that combination of switching to a more animal-based way of eating, and it was still ketogenic. So it was basically carnivore keto, and removing the problematic plant foods that were coming with those anti-nutrients. And it's almost impossible, by the way, to consume any type of plant that won't come with its own problematic side effect. Almost all plants are going to have some sort of anti-nutrient or some problematic thing that's going to come with it. Unfortunately, I do like chocolate. I used to make my own pizza from scratch, the dough and all. I used to make my own bagels from scratch. But that way of baking and cooking and making foods is gone, and I actually quite enjoy the way I eat now, which, as I said, it's essentially carnivore keto, where it's mostly animal stuff. It's like 95% animal stuff. The one plant that I still consume on a day-to-day basis is coffee, which is black coffee.
Oh, coffee, but you got to watch out for coffee, because coffee it's not a guaranteed, but I know that coffee does have a relationship with stomach ulcers. Like, I know some people now who, I mean, they were drinking coffee all the time, and now they can't drink coffee at all because they have stomach ulcers. I don't drink coffee at all. I see it as like a drug. I see a lot of people getting dependent on it. They get coffee headaches, and they're like, if they don't have coffee for like a day, their head is splitting and stuff.
Sure. Yeah. And there is plenty of research out there on coffee and how much of it is being part of advertising propaganda, corporate propaganda, because the coffee industry is rather big, and how much of it is actual legitimate science, that is up in the air. But what I can say is coffee is, from what I've looked into, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed foods out there for glyphosate and other types of herbicides, pesticides.
Yeah.
So if you drink coffee, get it organic whenever you can. I highly, highly recommend it. Now, you can kind of be okay knowing that it's the seed of the coffee that you're eating and not the part that gets sprayed, which is the outer flesh, the cherry itself.
Yeah. Hey, Johnny, I just want to say, we got a couple more minutes. I do have a job I have to go to.
Yep.
In like 20 or so minutes, I gotta get ready to head out there, and our recording is coming down to 4 minutes again. So I wish we could talk for freaking 2 more hours. But is there anything that you want to say like towards wrapping this up?
Yeah, sure. I can leave a nice takeaway for anyone who's interested in trying it out.
Go for it.
All right. So what I would say as a takeaway is question everything always, even if people kind of assume it's a solved, verified thing. It's always helpful to cross-check and just verify again that the information out there, the science that's out there, is still legitimate. Because you might be surprised at what you learn. Like in my case, learning about some of the elements of what I've just mentioned. Now, if you want to put this into practice, you can do what I did, which is an elimination style diet, where you eliminate everything from your diet and start with just one thing. And what I would recommend is some meat. Pick whatever meat it is. If it's whatever, ground beef, or if it's eggs. I know eggs isn't a meat, but it can be eggs. You could just survive off of eggs, right? Just pick one thing that you know is not going to bother you and will have all the essential fats and proteins that you need. You do not, by the way, you do not need carbs. The human body needs 0 carbs because it can synthesize its own carbohydrates. So if anyone ever tells you that you need carbs for whatever, your brain or something like that, they don't know.
That's
so
actually, it's funny that you say that, because that's what my nutrition professor tried telling our classes, is that the brain prefers energy from carbs. So that's what you're going to hear. You're going to hear somebody say that your body needs carbs because of your brain.
Yeah, that's definitely incorrect. Your body will synthesize whatever carbs it needs. You do not need to consume it. So do this elimination diet. Give it a make sure it's a legitimate scientific experiment. Experiment on yourself safely, and bring things down to just one food item. Let's say it's steaks or something like that, and then after a week, 2 weeks, then incorporate, if you're doing well on that, and you will, most likely you will, then add one more thing in and see how your body responds to that. If there's no side effects with that, because you'll know once you eliminate everything down to just one, you're no longer having like this Three Stooges condition where you don't know what's going wrong because you consumed a balanced diet of things. So you can't pinpoint what exactly went wrong. But if you're only adding one more thing in, you'll know if that is something that's good for you or bad for you, because your body will tell you, especially when you eliminate all the additional noise that comes from having a balanced diet.
Yeah, I definitely agree with practically all of those points. If you're researching something, always look into the opposite of it. Always look into the alternative. Always look into, okay, what happens when I do this to an extreme? And use your body. You have a body, experiment with it, try new things, and just make sure when you're trying those new things that you keep some sort of journal, and, realize that I know for myself, when I start to eat bananas again, that my body, it reacted a little different, and it took me like 2 days for my body to become accustomed to bananas. So yeah, it might take some time, some adjustments, but that's definitely advice that I would give too. Always look into the opposite. Always be willing to experiment. Okay, so I definitely have to update my my Zoom if I'm going to be doing more meetings like this, because I did not know that there was this 40-minute recording window. So I got to update that shit so I'm not going back and forth like we've been doing. So yeah, as I was saying, I 100% agree with you on your suggestion, on your advice to always look into alternative theories that are out there, especially when it's something that they think that the science is settled, or when it's something that they're really jamming in your face. Like, I mean, I think that they push like cholesterol being related to heart disease really heavily. Like, I'm sure that there's even like kids in elementary school who think that cholesterol is bad for you. So yeah, I guess the more of a consensus there appears to be on something, the maybe the more you should research it. But anyway, I'll let you have any other closing comments.
Uh, well, there's a lot to go into it. I guess an important thing to note, especially in the way that for the last 3 years of how society has and government control over society, and for that matter, corporate control of government has kind of gone. Yeah, it's the most important thing to you, to people in general, is their health. Making sure that you are as best as you can be, because if your body's not healthy, your mind is not healthy, because your mind is also part of your body as well. So I didn't touch at all, unfortunately, on the mental improvements that happened through the dietary and lifestyle changes that I went through. But just know that if you're struggling with mental issues, whether it be depression, anxiety, whatever it may be, there is a potential solution for that. And it can be as simple as changing your diet. And it has worked for me. It has worked for other people in dramatic ways. So I just want to leave that with them. And being strong, both mentally and physically, is going to be very helpful if we hope to sort of reclaim our natural freedoms and liberties that have been taken away from us for so long.
Yeah, no, spot on. I totally agree with that. I mean, I'll just say quickly that whenever I take on like a keto sort of diet where I try to do intermittent fasting, and I try to allow my body to use more of the ketone bodies for energy as opposed to glucose. I mean, I feel like I'm in a completely different headspace. I mean, it's really incredible, and I think this ties back to what I had said about the low sugar feeling. Like you have those Snickers commercials where it's like, I'm sure people are familiar with them. I'll cut one into the video, but where it's like a person is like acting crazy and stuff, erratic, and somebody's like, oh well, here, grab a Snickers.
Supermodels. What do you model? Gloves? What are you doing? A girl's totally into me.
Brad, eat a Snickers.
Why?
Because you get a little angry when you're hungry. Better?
Better.
And it's like, no, this is only really the product of like this like heavy carbohydrate diet and this heavy reliance on glucose as an energy source. And that when a person is, I suppose, I guess when they're using when their body's relying more on ketone bodies for energy, they're a lot more mentally with it. They have their faculties together. They're not likely to have burst of anger or burst of rage and things like that. So yeah, I mean, you're definitely right that when it comes, our physical health is definitely has an important relationship with our mental health. And they want us to be, of course, more physically unhealthy, not just because they make money off of us that way, but also if we're not physically healthy, if we're not eating the right stuff, then we're also going to be more likely to be mentally unhealthy, and then we're going to need to go to them for our mental health. But not just go to them for our mental health, but then we have more crazy people on the street that allow them to grow the government more. So I mean, it's really interesting how everything is weaved together, how everything, when you pull on one string, it affects things that are connected on another string. So yeah, it was a really, 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 really great conversation with you, Johnny. I definitely look forward. I really hope we have more conversations. Maybe we can continue this conversation when I have a little bit more time, and we'll get more into the mental health aspect of this conversation.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you for having me and allocating more time than I was expecting. Very much appreciated. I look forward to whatever content you produce in the future. I do appreciate your content, your perspective on things. It is revelatory. I guess that's the only word that came to mind, or the first word that came to mind. So
I just want it to be refreshing. I just want it to be refreshing. Sometimes I'm like scouring the internet. I'm like, is there something different out there that I can consume? You know, of course, I try not to be too much of a consumer, but yeah, I'm glad that I think revelatory is a word I'm honored that you used.
Yeah. Yeah. And by all means, you have my contact information, so reach out anytime. I'm more than happy to chat with you.
I'd be more than happy to have you back. You're definitely a sharp young mind, and you got lots of stuff to say. It looks like you spend your time doing your homework. You have as much fun doing research as I do, it seems like. So I'll definitely be having Johnny back on. And Johnny, I'll catch you in good time. I'm gonna end this recording now. And I guess farewell, everyone. Hopefully there's more videos like this.
What the American public doesn't know is what makes them the American public, all right?